From Los Angeles, this is Right About Now.
Right about now. Right about now. The Funk Soul Brother.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Right About Now. I'm your host, Jonathan Small, just 1 week away from the election. And if you're like me, you are a complete and utter wreck. But I found that recording and editing this podcast was quite therapeutic, actually. Only in the sense that if we think we have it bad, oh my goodness, Rebecca Deng's life, and yet it has a happy ending. It's a story of courage, a story of love, a story of faith. Rebecca Deng is the author of a powerful new memoir, which is called What They Meant for Evil. And many of us have heard of the Lost Boys of Sudan. Well, Rebecca is one of the 89 lost girls of Sudan. And Rebecca is part of the Dinka tribe. And she was just 9 years old when the Second Sudanese Civil War uprooted her peaceful life in her village. Soldiers, many of them just children, killed her mother, killed her father, her grandmother died, and Rebecca was forced to flee on foot for 1 year through the forests of Africa. And eventually she arrived at the Kakuma refugee camp in northern Kenya. She caught the attention of a teacher who told her that she may qualify for a program called the Lost Boys Refugee Resettlement Program. Seems like a different world when we accepted refugees with open arms. And Rebecca was able to move to Grand Rapids, Michigan to start an entirely new life. It wasn't easy making this transition, but she faced it as she has everything else in her life, bravely, thoughtfully. And today, Rebecca is an international speaker and an advocate for women and children who have been traumatized and victimized by war. She has spoken at the UN and served as a refugee Congress delegate at the United Nations High Commission for Refugees in Washington. She's also an author, and Rebecca has 3 children. I actually listened to her book I would take walks, I'd take breaks from work, put on my earbuds and take these long walks and just listen to her memoir. And it just, I don't know, there was just something about it that inspired me. So without further ado, here's Rebecca Deng. Rebecca Deng, welcome to the Right About Now podcast.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for welcoming me.
I'd love to give our listeners a sort of a sense of what your life was like before really the war started in the Sudan and before your life was really turned upside down.
My life was pretty much like a typical a child life that was born into what I would say a privileged family. I come from a Dinka tribe, and my tribe are cattle herders, and they grow corn and beans and sorghum for stable food. So my family had over 1,000 cows, which is a lot, So I had a typical normal child life of having food, 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, snack, dinner. My dad was one of the SPLA, which is South Sudan Liberation Army. So he was one of the commanders. He was in and out of the village. But, I heard that they are fighting war, but it didn't make sense to me as a child because I have not seen any war in my village or any suffering. So to me, it was like a story, or a tale from far away. Yeah. I come from a village that was close to Sut, which is the world's largest swampland. So it was green, and we had season like wildebeest season. So like if you see that scene in The Lion King, Where the wildebeest come, I'm like, oh yeah, that's what we grew up, and there will be a season for them. And when that season comes, they will always tell children go indoor, because the adult will see that they're coming. I guess when they're coming far away, you can see the dust in the air. And so people will see it far away, maybe an hour, 2 hours, and they will tell children, go indoor, it's wildebeest coming. So there was no electricity, no running water, just like families and people living there.
And then everything changes. There's a war. It was a civil war, right? At this time, this is in the early 90s.
It was ending of 1991, and it was tied to the civil war that was going on in South Sudan.
This is a story about Black Africa meeting Islamic North Africa. It's a meeting of cultures and religions that was destined for conflict. When Sudan gained its independence 37 years ago, the colonial powers decreed for their own vested interests that it should remain one country. And because of that, the Sudanese people were set on a course that led, inevitably, to the war and famine that blights this nation today.
And how old were you when all that began? Were you still pretty small child? Because your memory is really good in this memoir. You remember a lot of things.
Yes. I was about 6, I would say 6 going to 7. I was born in 85, so that's the ending of 1991, yeah. I was 6 years old, when my village was attacked.
And it was attacked by rebels or by
Yes, it was attacked by rebels. Those who have joined together with the Khartoum government, because the war in Sudan was between the Khartoum government in the north and South Sudanese. And most South Sudanese come from different tribes in South Sudan. So that civil war of 1991.
Well, you didn't see them right away, because as soon as you heard the sounds of war, you fled to the forest, right?
We fled to the forest, and we were there for, like a night, and then came back the next morning because we thought that, the attack will come to an end, and it just keep coming and it just keep going. So that's when we, unfortunately, we have to leave. My grandmother, my Koko, who I have talked a lot in the book, told my uncle to take her north, to just keep going, and that maybe in a month or 2 we will come back. But that month turned into a month and a year, and by the time we know it, now we are at the border of Kenya and South Sudan. And it was that time it was my first time actually to hear the word refugee, because I have never heard about the word. I didn't even know anybody that is a refugee. I just had, just like you and I, who are here in the U.S. and consider ourselves American citizens, like you don't think about.
And you hadn't really ever left your village before any of this happened.
No, I have never left my village. I have traveled to a nearby villages, like my grandmother village. It was not far away, probably like a day walk, and you go there, and then we spend a week and then come back. So I have never left my village until this war.
And the war, like you mentioned, it left you orphaned, and you eventually would lose your grandma, and you go on this, as you were saying, this journey with your uncle and some other family members. How far was the border of Kenya to where you were? Like, how many miles did you have to travel?
I remember, so we left my village maybe sometime in September, October. I can't remember the month. And then, but when we were at the border, like at Lokichokyo, a place called Lokichokyo, that was close to, because I remember we arrived at Kakuma and then it turned 1993. So it probably have taken me a year.
It's incredible.
To track.
Yeah. Just to walking through these forests and through these villages. And, this is Africa. We're talking about there's dangers in these forests. Beside the war, there's natural dangers like hyenas. You said you were very scared of. And did you have encounters with actually like wild animals while you were traveling through the forests and all the different places to get to the border?
So there was a village that we came through and was trying to cross in the water. And that was the first time I saw a crocodile. So we saw that. It was after our uncle had took us across the river and came back to get the other person. And there it was standing there.
Was it scary for a little kid?
So that was really, really scary. And then when we were going between Nairus and Lokichokyo, we have heard a hyena. And I was so scared. This was just right before I lost my uncle. Remember, there's a scene in the book where he had tied a rope in my hand and then tied it around his waist so that if I'm falling asleep, he can drag me or he can feel me falling. So that was just right, like we were together. I remember hearing that, and he's like, it's okay, I got you, I'm here, I will protect you. And so when I lost him, finally, I think I wiggled my hand out. I think that's what happened. The rope might have get loose in my hand. And I woke up, and then I was so scared because I'm like, where is my uncle? I don't know anybody to protect me. And I just remember hearing the hyena, So, yeah.
And so the animals are scary, but the humans are even more scary and more vicious. And
yeah, the human are even more scary. And then just right before Nairus, even there was a lot of bombing, the antelope that will come. The Khartoum government will send antelope to bomb people. And so that was really scary.
And then you tell one story which really upset me and if you could recount it here, you're in that one village with all the women and all the men have left the village to fight the war and the teen soldiers come through and they want to know where they're hiding the sugar and the soap and the things like that, and the women are not telling them, and then they take the baby right from the woman's arms and they threaten to drown the baby in the water, and the women then tell them where it is.
Yeah, actually, it was me actually screaming and then say, I'm going to tell them where the thing are because I saw where they were, because that baby was just a newborn baby, probably like a month or 3 months old. And so they went and showed them where the thing were, and they took all our stuff. And that's when my grandmother actually was like, you know what, I have lived in this land for so long. I have seen tribal fight, and I have never seen anything like this. And so you have to take children. Every time when there's a tribal war, it's always man to man or boys, and then even if they capture women in a tribal war, he said they will not threaten to beat them or anything. And this was just before they even threatened with the baby. They had, kind of like waterboard a woman. I described there one of people that was my grandmother friend, and I call her grandma too.
Yep, you said they almost killed her. Now, what was different? Why was it so? You said your grandmother hadn't ever seen anything like this. What was different this time around?
I think the level of people just being brutal toward women and children. I think that's what was new. And also what was new was how heavily armed those people were. Because I guess in a tribal war, you just have your spear, right? You have a spear. And if you have a spear, you have to throw it, and maybe it will be like landing on one person. It's not the destruction of a spear and gun. It's just not even comparable. And I think that's why my grandmother was like, I have seen tribal war, but this war is way more than
she could believe. And all, so during this journey on foot for a year, I can't even imagine how hard that must have been. And then you're also feeling, you're hungry. There's, and you're coming across other villages where people are starving, and you're seeing the first, signs of, people, little children starving with the swollen stomachs and things like that, right? Do you remember that feeling of being hungry and starving? Is it something that you never forget?
Yep. So it was my first time been going through, because I feel like sometimes people portray part of Africa like there's a constant anger, or people are hungry all the time and there's no food, and it's not true. That people will not be there for a generation if
Yeah,
they
exactly.
didn't eat.
Yeah.
Yeah, people have a normal life, and then something happened. Then you see those children on TV that with fly in their face and all of that, and that's not a normal life. So yeah, I remember going to bed and I just couldn't sleep. And the next morning, I'm so weak. And then we came to Bo Town, where I had described I have saw the baby, the starving children.
Mm-hmm.
And that I just so skinny, and I have never seen anything like that in my life, not in my village. And the thing is, before the war come to my village, there were maybe few orphans here and there, but people in the village take care of each other. So I have never seen anybody in my life that is malnourished until that scene. And so, and actually, until today, I don't see that. There's a picture that was taken by a U.S. journalist of a little girl or baby that is starving, and there's a vulture behind the baby there.
Yeah.
I don't even look at that picture, because every time I see it, I'm like, I even wonder if one of those kids that those children that I have, so I wonder if the journalist was coming there shortly after that or there, because it looked exactly like what I saw.
Oh, that's terrifying.
Yeah, and so I was refusing to eat the corn, the maize. We call it maize paste or the corn paste, because it didn't have taste. In my village, we eat, meat and chickens and fish, and the food was good.
Yeah.
And then I was just giving something. It was only put in the water. There's no salt. There's no anything in it. It's just like no taste. And we've been eating that for like a week. So when my uncle showed me those children and he said, look at those kids, you see them? And I say, yeah, I was scared. And he's like, if you don't eat this tasteless paste thing, you're going to be like them and you're going to die.
So you ate that maize, even though that was the maize from the UN. It was terrible, but you knew that you didn't want to be like those kids. So eventually you do get to a refugee camp in Kenya. And tell me the early days of that experience. What was that refugee camp like? What was the food like there? What was it? Was it a very? Can you describe it a little bit to us?
Yeah. So when we first arrived at Kakuma, what I will describe it is just like if you're going for a day trip to the desert.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I will describe it.
Okay.
Whatever desert would be, if it is in Dubai or Middle East, like it was nothing. The refugee camp was not prepared. There were no, there was no hospital. There was no buildings. There were no even like, like restroom where you can go to the bathroom. There was nothing. There were few trees here and there, and a lot of sand. So it was so dusty. I just remember arriving and I was like, oh, is that a river nearby? Because I grew up close to the Nile by the Sud, right? So it was green, lush all year round to nothing. And they're like, no, there's no river and there's no water. I remember I didn't see body of water for like a year or two. And so the only thing that they had there was boreholes where you can pump the water out. And then the UN distribute tents. But when you go in those tents, you just start dripping, like, because it's so hot, it's like 113 degrees or more. And then no enough water even. And it was a disaster. People were kind of all over the place. But then the one good thing that was there when the UN welcomed her, they did give us corn, but they give us beans. It was really good to have beans because beans have protein. and can do a little bit to your body than just, that cone by itself.
How much
or
had you
mace.
lost a lot of weight? At that point, were you very...
Yes, I had lost a lot of weight, and actually I was admitted at a place, they call it a feeding center, where they go and weight you. They take your weight, and then they saw that I was under, like kind of malnourished at that point. So I had to come in every morning. My cousin girl, she's now in Australia, was so kind. She will get up at her place, come and get me, and then take me there to the feeding center. So they will give me a scoop of porridge that had is packed with, like vitamins and all of that. So I did that for 2 months, and then I was in a normal weight and was graduated from that program. Mm-hmm.
And was this place that you ended up the place that you were for 7 years of your life, or do you move?
So since I arrived at the opening of Kakuma, which is 1992, ending of 92, 93, 92. So that was my home for 8 years. And slowly, life come to it. And it's true, when people settle a place, life does come to a place. So I think a couple of years later, there was like trees coming, and then there was a dry up river. It starts raining, and then the water will come through, but it was dangerous, right? Because there was no fence around it, and actually it took a lot of children. It drowned a lot of kids. So it wasn't, yes, there was a little bit of, you can see green, but it came with a cost.
And you tell one scary story where you put your foot in your shoes one day at the camp and you felt something funny in your shoe.
Yeah, so that was a scorpion.
Yeah.
Which I have described in the middle of, like in the beginning of entering Kakuma, the only animal that was alive on that dusty desert was a scorpion.
Ugh.
And that scorpion, I know 3 people actually. One of them was my grandmother, good friend, and she lived in the same compound as I do, and she actually died because of a scorpion, which like today, I just can't wrap it around my head, because she was in the war and she was shot in the war, survived a bullet, but then her life was taken by a scorpion at Kakuma. So yes, I put my foot in, felt something funny, and just before I even take my foot out, I was, stung by a scorpion. And I just remember crying, and then just suddenly my leg started like swallowing up. So people were like, oh, we think it's a snake, because this is like so bad. So I was right to the hospital. Again, I was put in a blanket, right? A blanket, and then they tie a blanket on a piece of wood, and then people put it on their shoulder. There was no ambulance. So this is how I was transported to the hospital. Okay. And then they didn't do anything. They're like, oh, because at that time when I arrived at the hospital, I could not open my mouth, and my eyes start swallowing, and every moved, it just feel like my body have like 1,000 needles stick into it.
Wow.
And I just don't remember the rest. And people that describe, they say, we thought you were going to die. Your mouth was having a foam,
Jeez.
Because it was a poisonous scorpion. Yeah.
Wow. So what kept you going through all this? I know your faith was very important to you. You also were very focused on your education, right? You went to a boarding school. How did you keep sane through this time of your life?
I think part of it is that there's something in us, in human. There's something that when we are created as human, we are ought to have beauty and hope and living a life. I think like we are created to live, right? So your body and your soul or whatever that is will fight and say that I'm going to make it. I don't have a choice to make it. So I guess that's how I went through that time. And my case is not special. Millions of people like me were going through the same thing. At the same refugee camp, a few years after we've been there, people arrived from Rwanda. And I didn't know what they just say there's war in our country. I said, okay, but as I came to the US and was educated, I'm like, oh, that was during Rwandan genocide, you know? So I was not special, but what kept me going is I think it's that spirit in all of us as human to fight to survive. Also, what kept me going, I think part of it being a child. I think children are very resilient, and if you give a child food and something to play with and a safe environment and a hope, something to give them hope, either that a football that they play or a school, I think children can thrive. So I think part of it is like, yeah, I had safety of not being bombed every day, because in Sudan we were bombed. And then there was a little bit of a school here and there, which was mostly flaying because the teachers didn't show up because they are not paid. Um, and I think too, part of the huge thing that kept me going was my uncle that was there, and a lot of my relatives that will tell me stories about back home. So when things get overwhelming, it's stories time. And talking about my homeland transport me back. And I can imagine, because I can remember running through that, like that grass that is, that I described, like it's like fuzzy on the top and yellow. I can just remember that and help me.
And was it sort of an image that someday I'll be back there?
Yes. And there was a hope that we will be back there. So the day we arrived at Kakum, my uncle told me we're going to be back. And that day turned into weeks, and week turned into months, and month turned into years. But there was that hope that you will go
someday go back, and that's what keep you cling to. But then you find out about this program where you can go to be relocated to the United States for the lost boys and the lost girls. And you mentioned there's millions of people in your situation, but how were you chosen to be one of the people that eventually gets to go to United States?
So the program for the lost boys and lost girls of Sudan was advocated here in the U.S. by a journalist and some of his friends. I think that journalist went to Ethiopia and saw the lost boys and then came back to the U.S. and probably get lost in his work. And then again, he heard they are now in Kakuma years later and went back, see it, came back, did a report, and then U.S. was like, okay, we will welcome these children to United States. And the whole idea, the whole qualification is that these children are orphaned and they have been working since the 90s. I did not make it to Ethiopia. I was way too young, but I had joined the Kakuma. So there was those who came from Ethiopia to Kakuma and new people that just come to Kakuma. I was one of them. So my teacher actually told me about the program. And this is the thing. This is what happened most of the time in a refugee camp. People that will hear opportunities lost are women and children. Yeah, because you just don't have an access to those information, right?
Right.
So my teacher told me, and he's like, hey, there's this program taking the lost boys and lost girls of Sudan to United States for a school. You are a bright student in my class. I know you are only 14 going to 15. But your uncle, we heard that there's a man that asked your uncle Hans to marry you. I think that you are a child. You should continue going to school, and I will take you to the UN headquarters, which is the UN normally doesn't live with refugees. They live kind of far away from where the camp is, and then they will just come in. So he took me there, and that's how I got into the program. And the program just asked, do you have a mom and a dad? And if you don't, they take your information down.
And as you mentioned, you might have been married. That was sort of the course of your life that it was going at that point, where the person that you was going to marry you was trying to collect a dowry so that he could wed you. And you were only 14 or 15, you mentioned. So that was kind of a way that you were able to get out of it, but it also made it a difficult decision when you got accepted, because you wouldn't be doing necessarily what your family had intended for you.
Yeah, I was scared. I didn't tell my uncle until I got my, because you have to go through medical checkup, make sure you don't have any diseases or TB or thing like that, because you get rejected when they find that you have some disease until you do your treatment, right? So when I got that I was approved, I'm gonna go to United States. I did my medical checkup. That's when I told my uncle wife, and she told my uncle, which surprised me because at the end he was like, you know what, you are my child. I have raised you. I know that if I'm going to give you to this man that you don't like, you're going to run away. I know your spirit. And second, you are dedicated to school, so you go to school. And I think when you hear thing of like child marriage and post marriage and all of these things, I sometimes part of it is connected to poverty and what people don't have. So in his mind, it is a good idea actually to have a man take care of you than just being, like in his mind, I think that's what he was thinking. But then when he knew that I have a better opportunity to be in a safe environment, to go to school, he definitely let me go. I know some girls that didn't make it because their family member just say no. So me coming to United States, I owe that to my family and my uncle to take a leap of faith and say that yes, you can go, when he know that there were, a little bit of dowry that was gonna come his way. So he did give up something.
He did the right
right?
thing, yeah, and he really
He
gave.
did the right thing.
You had definitely some angels in your life that really helped you through all this, with the teacher and your uncle and of course your strength. You find out that you're going to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and that was funny because you think that tell us you think that Grand Rapids, you get confused about what that means.
Yeah, because I think it was just like, like 2 months before we came to the US, we were learning English vocabularies, right? And one of the vocabulary was rubbish.
Yeah.
And so every time I hear Grand Rapids, I keep hearing Grand Rubbish.
So you thought you were going to a rubbish. Yeah,
I know. I keep hearing Grand Ravage, and I'm like, what in the world is going on? And I had went 6 months prior. I had went to Nairobi.
Yeah,
that was my first time actually out of the refugee camp in 8 years, in 7 years and some months. So I went with the girl guide, and then I went to Nairobi, and it was my first time again to see street children like collecting food on the trash. Even in a refugee camp, everybody just hear everything they have, but there was no separation. There was no people that collect food from the trash and those who eat well. Everybody was kind of the same. So that stood out to me. And when I keep hearing you going to Grand Rapids, and I was like, oh, are they taking us to be like those children? And I was scared.
But it ends up being okay. You go to, but this.
Oh, it ended up me arriving at the airport and then, coming into a warm home and food. And unfortunately, that changed like in day 2 or day 3, where the snow came down. And I thought that was the ending of the world, because again, I have never seen snow in my life. And there's this white fuzzy thing falling down, and then when you go out, you're deep into you come all the way.
You must have been
knees.
Completely freaking out. It was so foreign to you,
and it was so cold. Yeah, so I was freaking out.
But there were so many funny things. I think that's part of your book that's so interesting is all the things, to see it through your eyes when you get to America, all the strange things that we just take for granted because we live here. Even things like this strange vegetable they have me eat called broccoli that are like twigs, that are like sticks. Like you've never had broccoli and you hate it. It's disgusting. And then you were talking about like teddy bears on your bed. Like you had never seen in a pillow, right? I mean, there were certain things that just struck you as so strange.
For like the teddy bears, I was like, because some of them were huge, and I'm like, what are those? Like they look like animal, but they're not animal. I had seen a pillow, so that was not scary, or bed sheets and bed. But the teddy bears were like creepy to me, like these huge stuffed animal stuff.
It is kind of strange.
But they are not real animals, so I didn't understand why.
Yeah.
And that I'm 15 now, so I didn't understand why do a grown up person have like these animals.
That's true.
That
You're grown up. Who is the family? Your step parents? They sound like lovely people. They are an English woman. And are these like now considered to be your step parents? Like, are they your parents, or are you adopted by them?
They're my foster
your foster family. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it is from Scotland originally, and my foster dad is from Chicago area, and they both actually met in Kenya, which was like one of the weird thing, because after I've been in the house for a week, he said, "Hey, I want to show you my album." And I say, okay, my Africa album. And she was, I didn't know English. Then she is flipping through it. And we came upon a picture and I'm like, Esther? And she's like, what? I'm like, is that Esther? And she's like, yeah, how do you know Esther? And I'm like, she was my Girl Guide leader when the history that I just told you, that I went to Nairobi for the first time of getting out of Kakuma. Somebody have say, give these refugee children, put them through a Girl Guide training and take them away for, I don't know how the fund come about, but hey, I was taken out for like a week of Kakuma refugee camp to go to a big city. And Esther was my leader. And then my foster mom was saying, well, Esther was my student. I used to teach at a Turkana school. And we find out that she was 2 hours away from my refugee camp in 1996.
Wow.
So while I was
what
in
a small world. That's incredible. Huh?
Isn't that so crazy?
Yeah. And also we have to say, you hadn't seen very many white people. I mean, I guess you saw some of them at your refugee camp, and you tell a funny story, like when you first saw a white person, like for you, it was like, what? They look like they didn't have skin, right? Like that was your impression as a child. Like they were just like eyes without skin, because you had never seen that before. Was your general impression of Americans, mostly white, that you're dealing with in Grand Rapids, Michigan, that they were kind, or was there a lot of cultural differences that were hard for you to adjust to?
Yeah, people were kind to me in a way, like people smile, but then like the word kindness sometimes, yes, people can just smile, but I feel like kindness go a long way when you reach out to those people and welcome them and making them part of your community. That's a genuine kindness. You can smile to somebody, but if you ever don't welcome them, so people were kind and I felt welcome somehow, but it was overwhelming as a Black child coming to a predominantly white school, white churches, white everything, and not seeing anybody from anybody that looked like me, right? Those years where I wasn't driving, I was just being dropped at the school and all of that, it was okay. But as I keep getting older and being by my own and not with my foster family, I definitely have experienced things that it would have been better if people have prepared me or tell me. And one of them was that scene that I don't know if I shared it in the book, but I went to the store to Meyer and getting grocery, and I'm standing, and then a lady just turned around and looked at me and she's like, hey, you immigrant, back up, you want to steal my information? I'm like, what? So thing like that, and then as one time I'm driving and I got pulled over and it's like, can I see your ID? I give it. Is this your address? Yes. Is this your car? Yes. Oh, okay. You went back and you came back. You're like, okay, you can go now. I didn't have anything, but those things were just like strange, right?
Yeah.
And of course, one of my favorite story, which I share in the book, was when I was working at Victoria's Secret and a mom came in with a little toddler. And I was measuring her, and the baby looked at me and she's like, Mommy, look at the big talking chocolate.
That is, when you told me that story, I couldn't believe it.
And the mom was just scared. So she grabbed the baby, ran out of the thing. And I was like, what? And everybody came to me by my coworkers, and they're like, "We are so sorry." And to me, actually, I was like, you know what? Children say what they see. I'm not taking this. I'm not mad at a child. I just hope that the mother do something or teach them like there are different colors, shades, and you know what? I come from a place with a lot of sun, so I was kissed by the sun, and it's okay.
That's a good way to talk
but
about it.
Yes, but she did come back later on. She came back a week later looking for me. And she apologized. And she said that, you know what I did? I went back and I bought a book of different faces of people and where they live around the world. And so that is started a conversation. A baby make her do her homework, which she should have done, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, so she did the right thing ultimately. Took her a few days to figure it out. One of the promises you make, or one of the things your family wants you to promise, is that you're going to marry somebody within your tribe, eventually. But you actually, in America, you end up meeting a white man of Dutch descent, and you end up marrying him. Was that a difficult decision for you to make?
Yeah, it was a different decision because I have known what my family have said back home. And part of it, I think it wasn't like to be racist or anything, but they just say that like different cultures, it's just gonna be hard. But he courted me. It was the right thing to do. And so I went for it. I went for it in the sense that like if we are all together on this, and if he loved me and I loved him, we should be just okay.
Well, talk to me a little bit about what you're doing now and how, you have children, 3 children?
Yeah, my first one, the one I had when I was 16 in high school,
Mm-hmm.
he actually graduated from high school and is doing her thing now. And then the 2 little one, Deng and Leona, are the little one that I have right now. So right now, with the COVID-19, a lot of my speaking engagement were scheduled, right?
Yeah.
And got canceled because my book came out last year in September. And most of my schedule were speaking engagement was beginning of this year that we are in, which I have done some New York and Indiana. But yeah, I'm hoping to go back into more speaking engagement and being here for my kids and work and hopefully think about what I should be doing next in terms of writing and things like that.
Yeah. And you did go back to Africa. Did you go back to your hometown?
I did not make it to my home village. When I went back, I it was during my master's, so I had to do an internship, and I chose to go back home there. So I was in southern Blue Nile, kind of closer to the Ethiopia border, for 3 months, and then kind of rest of the month I traveled some part of South Sudan, but unfortunately I did not make it to my hometown. It is a trip that I look forward to one day when it will happen. I don't know when.
How is that town? How is the situation in Sudan now? Is it still very dangerous? Has it gotten better?
So South Sudan became independent in 2011. And then shortly after that, it went back into its own civil war. But right now, there's peace, but there's still those consequences of war, right? So the country is not doing well in terms of providing basics need like health and education and safety. There's still a lot of insecurity in the area. But it is a country. It is independent. They have their own flag. They have raised the flag, and I'm happy for that. But I think it's a long road from now to when most citizens will feel like they have a country.
Do you feel more connected to Africa or more connected to the United States? I know you're a citizen of the United States. Do you feel like you know Africa because you left there when you were fairly young, or do you feel more like a United States citizen, or maybe you're both? Like maybe you're a person.
Yeah, I feel like cultural wise, I feel more American because This is the culture I grew up and have known. However, sometimes I'm isolated, or when you get into situation where people think you are not from here, right?
Yeah.
So that's something different. But yeah, culturally, I feel more American than my Sudanese. I know my Sudanese culture and I'm proud of it, but I just didn't live so long in it.
Yeah. Even when you were in the refugee camp, that wasn't necessarily your Sudanese.
It wasn't my Sudanese culture, exactly. And I feel like this is hard to, like it's hard to imagine, but Kakuma refugee camp was the most diverse place that I have ever lived. There were people from Ethiopia, from Kenya, from, Sudan, from Burundi, from, it was the most diverse. And within South Sudanese themselves, there's 64, 63, 64 tribes, people are 65. I don't know what is the real number. But I was friends with most people from school. So I didn't really, so my tribe was there, I'm proud of it, but I didn't have that like a tribal identity, like this is my tribe. And, because like my friends were kind of all over the place. So that thing, I feel like it was a foreshadow of my life in the US. I think that life in refugee camp really helped me to adjust well in the US. Because when I came here with different culture.
Probably much more diverse in the camp than it was in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
But again, I had those skill of living with people from different backgrounds. I think the only thing that just happened was like going from, black of different shade of black, lighter black, darker black, to like maybe more lighter, like white. I think that was the only thing that changed coming here. And of course, the language and environment, weather was huge.
But you really are a success story. You went to university. You made it as an American citizen. And yet, there's something that I read about called survivor's guilt. Mm-hmm. My understanding of that is that, you wonder, why me? Why, of all the people who, died, that I saw die, or that have maybe not fared as well as me, why do I have this opportunity? Did you go through that for a little while?
Absolutely. I did. And I continue going through it, but like in a much healthy way than before. But it is something that any human being, if you make it, you just wonder, because I'm not special than any of my friends that didn't make it. Some of the girls that were proposed to at 14, 15, that they didn't get it out, they didn't make it out of Kakuma, or some that die. So in the beginning, when I came here, I basically just work. I work and go to school and work and go to school and send all of my money back home, because I'm like, if I make it and I'm here today, the only way I can say thank you enough is always giving, right? But then life here in the U.S. costs, a lot. It's not free. And there's a myth about refugee coming here and getting free help, but that's only apply for, those who came as 18, maybe a 3 month of help with rent. And then after that, you are on your own. So you have a person that comes from a different country, not knowing a language, doesn't have a contact, doesn't have family member to call for help, and then they are on their own. So yeah, so that was, I feel like a lot of refugees have that, or like if anybody that survived, a survival guilt, you always want to do more. Now I kind of learn a healthy way of like, it is in me. Of course, I'm always going to be moved because I have seen both spectrum of humanity, from beauty to ugliness. And so I know that when somebody called me and say I'm at the hospital with my child and I need help, sometimes I don't, even if I know that I'm going to be short on my bill, sometimes I might respond because I know exactly what they're talking about. Like there's no way out for them. And then sometimes somebody will ask me, Christmas is coming and this thing I need. And I know that they maybe just want to get a phone or something like that. And then I'll be like, no, I cannot help you now, but maybe when I pay my bills and I have extra, we will talk about it. So I'm dealing it in a healthy way where I'm like, I have to take care of myself first, because you can't give what you don't have. If I can't pay my car and my house, I'm going to be out on the street and I might not have a job to help you. So I have to help myself too. So yes, it is a dance. And yeah, but at the end of the day, just doing the right thing. And I feel you will know when somebody asks for help or when you need to jump in.
Right. And you had examples growing up of people genuinely helping you when you needed help. What do you mean? What is the book is called "What They Meant for Evil"? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, what they meant for evil in that title is like everything, like starting from the Khartoum government. What they were meaning for evil is that Southerners are African descendant. They are not equal to what they think they are. Bombing people, killing my dad's generation, like in a genocide way to just totally wipe out people. So what they meant that for evil, right? Like to wipe out, but I have make it. It was taken out of a verse that I like in Genesis about Joseph when his brothers had sold him, right? And then later on, they came to Egypt looking for food because there was a starvation in Israel or wherever, the land of Canaan. I don't know where they were. And then they were afraid that Joseph will now refuse because he's in a much powerful position and not give them. And he said that what you meant for evil, God intended for good, the serving of many lives. So that's where the thing come from. So it's like what the Sudan government meant for evil, what they meant that abused me meant for evil toward me. And what I actually, they included in it where I had struggled for a while of just, personal insecurities. I come to United States. I don't know the language. I have a baby in high school. Maybe I should not go to school. That was a battle that I only have to fight. And I end up fighting it. But I had meant evil to myself by thinking negatively about what I cannot do and what I cannot do. So that's where, and now a lot of the lost boys and lost girls of Sudan that were kicked out of the country, made refugee, resettled to United States, are the one building hospitals, school, giving revenants, like giving money back home, contributing huge amount of money, sponsoring children. So it's like, so all of these things, like kicking these children out, kicking us out as the lost girl, giving her the name lost children when we were never lost, we were with our tribal people. All of these things were evil, but it turned out for good, for the betterment of humanity. And not only to South Sudan, we are American citizens, we are Canadian citizens, those who went to Canada, some are Australian, some are from UK. And it's a betterment for humanity. So it was something that was designed to destroy population of people, but it turned out to be something that is a blessing back to humanity.
Thank God it did. Thank God it did. All you had to go through, and there is a light at the end of that tunnel.
And also for some people to have hope and to say that, because I feel like sometimes when people think of refugees or children coming from different background or immigrants, it's easy to be like, oh, they are just hard and we can help them now, or like, and it's like, no, when you do a right thing, just watch it, watch it transform, for me, it was my teacher doing the right thing, taking me to the UN. It was UN people to accept me. It was the family that opened up. It was the school that I went to, so each step, you might not finish the whole process, but if you do the right thing, the universe is going, the rhythm is there. And it's, the momentum is there, and it's always going to turn out okay.
Well, that's good.
And I'm not saying not broken, right? Because, and I feel like American people have issues with, like, if it is broken or if people think that is it's not good. Like I feel like Americans struggle to see that like broken thing can be made beautiful. Like, and in life, if you go through it and you are not broken one time, like I just don't know what kind of life is that either. Then I feel like you're living in fear and shelter.
Such a good point, especially now, because I think America is really going through a time of real reflection. And, our suffering compared to what you had to suffer through is, at least mine personally. I mean, there's people who are probably suffering more than me in the world, but, but like right now, I look at our country and I'm like, oh, there's a pandemic. We have this crazy president. Democracy is being threatened. And, it feels very dark to me. But, it's wonderful to hear people like you come out and say, look, I've been through a lot of things, and sometimes things have to be dark for the light to be shown, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think for me, like this season in our life in the U.S. is better telling, because we go around the world talking about how we are a democratic country that respect all kind of life. And it's it's showing now that maybe what we claim is not really 100% true.
Yeah.
So what do we do? So it is.
It's revealing. It's revealing a part of our country.
To look in our house and put things in order before we tell the rest of the world.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, Rebecca, wow, what a great conversation. Thank you so much for writing this beautiful book. And I'm looking forward to more of your writing. It sounds like you really enjoyed writing.
I do. And for this book here to be out, it was so hard. Like I didn't want to do it again. Like, because you are just exposing everything. Everything you read in that book, that's me. So I just can't wait to go back into writing about, different things, things that give me joy, things that I think that we should go as humanity, and how we should, grow and also bring those around us together on that journey. So I'm just looking forward to that time.
And you have such a different perspective and a unique perspective from what you've been through. It would be wonderful to hear more about that. Well, thank you again. And everybody, the book we only touched a little part of it. So there's so much there. So I really strongly recommend people read it.
Yeah. So like for most people, I say this book touch a lot of things: immigrant, refugee, United States, being here, education, child education, foster care, hope, healing is a huge part of it. Like when things happen to you, trauma, how do you go from that place of disaster and hatches to being restored?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure. What They Meant for Evil by Rebecca Deng. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for listening to the Right About Now podcast. Hope you enjoyed the show. Big shout out to my pops, Michael Small. His music is in the background. This is the score for the incredible movie Mountains of the Moon. Hey, listen, if you liked this podcast, do me a favor. Please rate it, like it, maybe even leave a review on iTunes or wherever you might listen to your podcast. That goes a really long way in helping me gain even more listeners and subscribers. And plus, I just like to read the feedback. So, until we meet again, wishing you and yours the best. Keep on writing and keep on keeping on.